Hello, everyone, and welcome to Second Cup with Keith. I'm your host, Keith Giles. We are live here this morning on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. Get my lights going here. So you can see me a little better if you're watching the live stream. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast playback later, none of that will matter. I want to, again, as always, say this episode of the Second Cup with Keith podcast, this Choircast podcast. We are proud members of the Choircast Podcast Network. And this episode is brought to you by, as always, the book, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus by yours truly, Keith Giles, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas. It is still number one after 10 months on Amazon. Probably sold now like 1,500 or more copies of this book. I will be live this Thursday evening on Coast to Coast Radio. Remember Art Bell, Coast to Coast, that show? It's all about the paranormal and all that kind of stuff. I will be a special guest for the first hour this Thursday night talking about this book, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus, and specifically the overlap between quantum science and the sayings of Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas. So yeah, listen in if you can stay up that late. It's 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 p.m. my time. So I'll be from 11 to midnight. That's what I'll be doing this Thursday night. Very excited about that. Let me lower my music here a little bit. There we go. Yeah. So before we get into this episode, I'm gonna take a little time, and I apologize because I had not planned to do this. My intention this morning is to talk about the Quantum Sayings of Mary. That's the next book I'm going to be publishing in a solo book that I'll be publishing, coming out in May of this year. So I'm wrapping that book up as we speak. Actually, I'm probably like 99% done with the writing side of it anyway, and preparing the final manuscript. Then I'll have to print it out. My wife Wendy does some proofing. We'll do final edits, and then we'll send it over to Matthew over at Choir Publishing to get this thing ready. We have already got a cover and all that. Then I'll start sending out copies for endorsement quotes and those sorts of things. Anyway, so that was what I was going to talk about today, and that is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm not changing that. That will be exactly what I will be spending most of my time on in this episode, but I do need to address something a little more urgent, I guess. Is urgent the right word? I don't know if it's urgent, but relevant, I should say. So this morning, I got up. Wendy and I were sitting at the kitchen table. We were talking. I was kind of flipping through, looking at the morning news and that kind of thing. And I'm sure you all do that, right? There's like a couple of newsletters I subscribe to that kind of summarize the news. And so we kind of looking down. And I saw, once again, I'd already seen it before. So this wasn't the first time I'd seen it. But the news that one of the executive orders that Donald Trump signed last week was that Black Lives Matter and pride flags can no longer be flown in government buildings. And I just had a flash of a thought. Like, so if he can take flags down, how long until he starts adding flags? Like, how long until he starts now issuing another executive order saying that government offices have to fly, let's say, that Christian nationalist flag, you know? I forgot what it was called. It's the tree flag, whatever, the one that Mike Johnson has flying outside his office, the one that Justice Alito was flying over one of his homes. How long before he gets an order that they have to fly a Christian nationalist flag? And then I thought, how long until they have to fly a Trump flag? Literally, this is the order of events to which my mind was going. He took down Pride and Black Lives Matter flags. How long until he starts telling them what kind of flags they have to also fly in addition to the American flag? How long until that flag is a Trump flag? And then what kind of Trump flag would he fly? And I remembered that someone had made a fake kind of like flag or image of Trump image, like a logo, where it's these golden letter T's on a black background. And of course, those 4 T's going around the clockwise square form the negative image of a swastika. And I thought, oh, that's too good. Like that's called satire, everybody. So I kind of posted that. Well, first I sent it to Matthew. I sent the image to Matthew, and I said something like, Trump orders that this flag be flown over all government buildings with that picture. And Matthew replied instantly, no, no, no. Oh my God, tell me this is a joke. And I said, see, you didn't automatically know it was a joke, did you? Because it's something that you could believe. Like if CNN reported this, what would we do? We would roll our eyes. We'd say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But it would just be yet another thing added to a never-ending list, this relentless barrage of insanity that just has been flowing for the past 7 days, right? Can you believe it? It was 7 days ago today that he was sworn in. It's only been a week. It blows my mind. So anyway, I shared that. I thought, you know what? So then I shared it on my Facebook and my Instagram. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and share this. And I shared the image. I said, new presidential flag to be flown all over U.S. government buildings. Now, half of the responses that I received were like Matt's response. Things like, this can't be. Oh my gosh. No, just reactions, like half of the reactions were things like that. The other, maybe a third of them were like, oh yeah, I get it. This is a joke. And then the other reactions I was getting, not as many, but I was getting a lot of them, that this is wrong. These are lies. This is misinformation. It's like, okay, please understand what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm just going to address this, and then I'm going to get into our topic. Understand what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to literally trick people into thinking that this really is going to happen. Okay. This is the thing about satire, right? With satire, you look at what's really happening now, and then you kind of push it out to absurdity to say, oh, here's what's happening. In other words, here's what could happen. And the momentary disconnect that you feel of like, is that true? Could that be true? Is telling you that, yes, it could be true. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I replied to everybody saying, is this true? Saying, no, it's a joke. It's not true yet. Not yet. But I'm telling you, it won't be long before something like this is exactly the truth. And then what are we going to do? What will we do when it is true? I also shared a video, like a 10-minute video clip on my Facebook. I recommend you watch it. It's something about crossing the Rubicon. It's a short video, real simple, but it makes a really great point, and it's asking a similar question of all of us, which is essentially to decide for ourselves. Again, not telling you what to decide, but right now, think for yourself, what is the bridge too far? Like, what is the point of no return? And for you, maybe it would be something like that, like a swastika or a fascist flag that Trump would say. If Trump were to say that, then okay, for me, that would be the end of it, right? Right. When Trump started his campaign the first time, right, he said I could stand in Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I would not lose any supporters. And I'm wondering if he's right. So that's what I'm saying. Would that, for example, would that be like, what if he literally took a gun and shot someone on live television? What if there was a leaked video of him having sex with an underage girl? I mean, what would it be? In other words, there has to be, for everybody, even if you're a Trump supporter, even if you're all the way 100% MAGA, there's got to be a point at which you would say, okay, that's too much. And for some of you, it would have to maybe be something like really bad, like Trump would break into my house and strangle my wife. Okay. If he did that, not saying he would, but if he did, okay, then I would not support it, right? But there's somewhere is the line, and it's important to figure out what is the line, and at what point will you say, okay, this is the point too far, and then ask yourself, what will you do about it? So anyway, I had a whole lot of people basically telling me, several people telling me also things like, Keith, you're so good at explaining complex theological, spiritual concepts to people and all of that. And again, guys, I have been struggling with this for the past year, honestly, really easily the past year, more than a year. When I started with the God Squad initially, and it was just during the election, I personally felt conflicted that I was spending so much attention focused on politics. And I eventually made up my mind that, okay, after the election, I'm going to step away from God Squad because I wanted to step away from focusing so much on politics, right? And actually, between the time I left the God Squad and a week ago, this past week, I have pretty much stayed out of posting things, talking about things on my personal Facebook page and things like that. But yes, over the past week, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, yes, over the past week, since Donald Trump was sworn in, since he refused to put his hand on the Bible, since he attacked a Episcopal bishop for speaking the words of Jesus to him and calling for mercy for those that are suffering, since he signed 40-something executive orders that were illegal on all these horrible things. Yes, suddenly, yes, I have said things. I'm speaking out. And as I said to someone a minute ago, I feel like we are days away from a mass genocide, okay? Or something like it. And I'm not going to be silent in the same way that I would, if I lived in Nazi Germany, I hope I would not be someone who was silent, who just kept doing Bible studies and talking about, the meaning of this word in the Greek or some deep spiritual, truth, while horrible things are happening in the background, or at least at this point, horrible things are about to happen. They're in motion that are going to happen. And if you aren't paying attention, I can understand why you don't understand why I'm at this sort of heightened level of concern. I mean, again, going back to when I was with the God Squad, so much of what we talked about in the God Squad during the election was trying to raise awareness about the rise of Christian nationalism, the threat of Christian nationalism, and the Heritage Foundation, and this Project 2025 playbook, over 1,000 pages, and the awful, horrible, destructive, illegal, anti-democratic, anti-constitution, unconstitutional things that were planned in Project 2025. Okay. Well, as of a week ago, those things on Project 2025 have become executive orders. It's happening. Like the thing we were warning was going to happen is happening. And so, yeah, I'm talking about this again because now it's not maybe it's going to happen. Now it's happening. It is happening. And I was also thinking too about, like, people are saying, Keith, suddenly you're getting all political. Honestly, I don't see it as being political. I see it as speaking out for justice. And I think a lot of people need to recognize the difference between politics and justice. Politics would be only, advocating for certain politicians, pushing for certain legislation, asking people to vote for this person or that person. And again, yeah, sure, I was doing that during the election because I was saying, don't vote for the fascist. Don't vote for the guy who's going to become a dictator and do all these horrible, unconstitutional things that are going to hurt people, that are going to be very oppressive to people of color, people who are gay and trans, to women, to immigrants and refugees, and things like that. So now that is actually happening, yes, I'm speaking out again. And so, but at the same time, yes, I'm still wrestling with this tension. Okay. And someone today very, very thoughtfully and very kindly was sort of challenging me on that. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the tone that this person showed, in pushing back, because I'm doing that internally, just so you know, as well. And again, for the last year, if you've been following this podcast or my blogs or anything like that, you know that I've been struggling with, this Socrates quote about where he said, to affect change, your focus should be not on fighting the old, but on building the new, right? And so that's, again, part of the reason why I stepped back from God Squad, was to say, I'm going to stop fighting the old. I'm going to start focusing on building the new. And I've been trying to do that. This podcast has, for the most part, I think since I've relaunched the podcast, if you go back and look at the episodes that I've done, I haven't talked about politics. I have talked about oneness and connection. I've talked about shared divinity and shared humanity. And I still think that's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to change us, right? First it changes us, then it changes the world. I still believe that, right? I wrote a blog post last week about, and I encourage you to read it. It's the post that I wrote about. It's called "The Gospel According to David Lynch," because I'd come across this David Lynch quote where he talked about, there's so much darkness and negativity, and he said, ignore the darkness, ignore the negativity, just shine your light. And by shining your light, because darkness isn't a thing, right? And so if you shine your light, darkness disappears, and the light is all that's left. And I still believe that, and I love that. And I'm going to keep on shining the light. I'm going to keep on letting my light shine. That's what I'm going to do in just a second. But first, have to do this little housekeeping thing to explain myself, why I'm doing what I'm doing, why you're going to start seeing sort of the left and the right, the left hand and the right hand. Because I feel like, whereas I completely embrace Socrates' idea that what we should focus on is building the new rather than fighting the old. Well, I completely agree with David Lynch's idea that we should ignore the darkness and shine our light. I do agree with that. But I also think that part of this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm open to learning and growing. I feel like part of shining your light is pointing out the darkness. And I feel like some of the posts that I'm making are trying to say, this is darkness. Because there's a lot of people out there saying, no, this is light. This is good. This is what's going to make America great again. This is restoring some kind of positive values, even Christian values. Because again, the people who are doing this, these Christian nationalists, are doing so, and as they're doing it, they're saying this is Christian. This is biblical. Now, it isn't. It's completely wrong, completely anti-Christ and anti-biblical. And so I guess, for example, what just happened again last week with Bishop Buddy, standing up in a pulpit and speaking truth to power and calling for mercy. That's important. That's necessary. Now, that's letting your light shine. Yes, it is. But you can't let your light shine without exposing the darkness at the same time. And so, now, again, to one of the points somebody made, again, on my post this morning, that, Keith, lots of people are doing this, right? Lots of people are telling us about all the horrible things Trump is doing. Lots of people. And that is true, right? I agree. It's not like if I don't speak out against these things, no one will speak out. And maybe that's true. Maybe I need to think about that and say, okay, maybe I'll just let people like David Pakman and Brian Taylor Cohen and Jesse Dollemore and John Fugelsang, I'll let them be the ones who stand up and sound the alarm. And let's be honest, they're much better at it. I will agree. Not only are they better at it, they've been doing it a long time. All of those guys have built incredible platforms. They have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people listening to and sharing their content every single day, right? all those guys are Monday through Friday. And John Fugelsang, I know for a fact, is also doing stuff on the weekends. And when he's not doing his show, he's on comedy tours. He's appearing on my podcast and other people's podcasts and on MSNBC and things like that. And so he's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, he's on Twitter, he's on Blue Sky. Like he's saying these things, and he has a much wider audience on these things than I do. And so maybe I should just let those guys be that. Let them fight the old. Let them point out the darkness, and then what I will do is focus on shining the light. And maybe that is what I should do. I'm just telling you right now, just being really vulnerable and transparent, and say I'm still trying to figure it out, because there's also a quote. I couldn't find the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, when I speak out and people say, why do you bother to speak out? Don't you know you're not going to change those people? Don't you know they're not going to listen to you if you speak out? And then the response was, oh, I don't speak out to change them. I speak out so that they don't change me. And that's honestly, at this point right now, that's how I feel. Just deep down, that's how I feel. When I see people doing these horrible things that are hurting the people I love, to not say something, I feel, is to let them win. It's to let that bullshit, is to let that darkness cover me and consume me. And yes, I can shine my light, but part of shining my light, at least as I understand it right now, is to call bullshit. Is to say, no, that isn't the words of Christ. No, that isn't good. Or this is, let's expose the deeds of darkness that are being done, and say it what it is, call it for what it is. And if nothing else, I want to just stand up and say, I want to make sure it's very clear whose side I'm on. If they come knocking on doors to put people in zip ties and take them off to the encampment, I don't want them to miss me. Here I am. Come get me. If you're going to start rounding up Muslims, I'm a Muslim. If you're going to start rounding up trans people, I'm trans. If you're going to start rounding up gay people, I'm gay. I'm not going to let these people go without putting some skin in the game. And I think this kind of thing has to happen now. We can't wait. I think the strategy of, well, let's wait and see. Do you see how fast the darkness is spreading? It's spreading very quickly. I think I said on the Sunday show, the Heretic Happy Hour, yesterday with Matthew, I said, yeah, last week was a long month. And he said, oh, this should be a t-shirt. Yeah. And it could be a t-shirt, but it could be a tattoo, right? Because I think over the next 4 years, we're going to be saying that last week was a long month. Last month was a long year. Last year was a long decade. Then hopefully the next 4 years is something that we can survive. And it isn't so much, again, I'm honestly not very hopeful that, like, I don't think sharing memes and satire posts like the one I did this morning, I don't think it's going to change the administration. I don't think it's going to stop this machine that's, just now ramping up and gaining momentum. I'm very pessimistic on that side. But I just feel like we can't sit back and let it happen without saying or doing something, right? I also saw someone had shared on Instagram and Facebook a post about how there's been such a media blackout in ways we don't realize. But they were talking about how in other countries that there were protests, there were anti-Trump protests in other countries after the inauguration. And I thought, number one, not only did I not know that, and I need to go look that up and research that. Like, is there any footage on YouTube or anything like that where I can find? Were there protests in England or France or Germany or Australia or New Zealand? I don't know. Canada, I don't know. but I want to look it up. But you know what? Here's the thing. Even if it's not true, let's say that's propaganda. No, there weren't any anti-Trump protests, whatever. Guess what? There also were not major protests in America, right? Like I saw on the Daily Show, what's his name? Jordan? I just lost his name. Jordan Tapper? Is that his name? Jordan. Anyway, the guy that does the man on the street things for a Daily Show, right? Klepper, that's his name, Jordan Klepper. It was that inauguration day. Of course, they did it inside, but there's all these Trump supporters standing around because they bought their plane tickets and flew out there for nothing and got literally left in the cold. And they were talking about how somber it was and how quiet it was, right? And I thought, yeah, where's the protests? Where are the anti-Trump protesters? Now, I get that people are exhausted. I'm exhausted. But man, I'm wondering what happened, right? Why aren't we organizing protests in Washington, D.C., in Dallas, Texas, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Seattle, in Denver, like Chicago? Where are these protests? Why is there no major anti-fascist, anti-Trump backlash? I mean, this should unify everybody. Like, you should be able to reach out to immigrants, refugees, gay and trans people and their allies, people of color, women, like progressive Christians, on and on and on. Like, you could probably get a pretty good crowd, I would think, if you were an organizer and you wanted to organize a protest. And I'm wondering if part of the reason why they're not organizing protests is that part of Project 2025 was to respond to anti-Trump protests with the military, with lethal force. And maybe they are aware of that. Maybe they know, oh, if we do organize these things, a lot of people could get really hurt. And that might be true. But I would say if there was a protest in El Paso, Texas, tomorrow, I would be there. I'd clear my calendar and I would be there. I'm not an organizer. I don't know how to do this. But I wish there were more protests. And I feel like we need more of these kind of outspoken protests. I know I've wasted the whole half hour now talking about this, and who knows, maybe this is my episode. I intended this episode to be talking about the quantum gospel of Mary. By the way, last week was also going to be about the quantum gospel of Mary, and I bumped it to this week. And then, of course, the inauguration happened and all the other stuff happened. And this morning I made the post, and then I got all this pushback. And so, yeah, I felt like I had to say something. I want to also, though, shout out to one of my followers and supporters on Instagram who sent me a private message after I got a whole lot on Instagram, after I got a whole lot of pushback. And this person said, "Hey, thank you for all you're doing. Don't let the naysayers get you down. A friend of mine is a pastor in California. We were at dinner just after the election, and he asked, 'What are we going to do now?' And I said, 'We're going to go full Bonhoeffer. That's what we're going to do.'" And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I feel like we need Bonhoeffer levels of pushback. Now, I don't mean the part about, the bomb in the suitcase. I don't mean that. I think that was a misstep. I think that was a mistake. I think Bonhoeffer would say that was a mistake if he could talk to us today. So no, I don't think violence is ever the answer. And we know it isn't, right? Because if we look and see, right, because of the failure of that bomb to eliminate Hitler, Hitler was emboldened and felt like God had spared him for the purpose. And it made him even more, excited and more passionate about doing the awful things he had planned to do, because he thought God had spared his life so that he could continue to do these awful things. Isn't that what happened with Donald Trump, right? That assassination attempt last year? Because he survived it. He said this in his inauguration speech, that he felt like God had stepped in and spared his life, and therefore he feels like everything he's about to do, all this Project 2025 stuff that he is, again, two-thirds of the executive orders that he signed last week are verbatim Project 2025 marching orders. It's the 2025 manifesto. And so he feels even more like, yes, we're going to move forward. We're going to do this, right? So, yeah, I don't, because of that, I don't think violence is going to be the answer. I don't think violence is going to help us. And again, I don't want to fearmonger anybody. I know people are fragile. I know people are scared. A lot of the comments that I received today were from people saying, like the post like I did this morning saying that this was the Trump flag that's going to be flown over government buildings. Gosh, we're just exhausted, and I get it. We're worn razor thin, and it's like we just went through this week that was awful and horrible, and the idea that it could get worse is devastating. But I'm sorry to say, my friends, it's going to get worse. There's no possible way that the worst is over. There's no possible way that this first week of 43 something executive orders is the end of it. And okay, now he's going to sit back and drink Diet Coke and eat his McDonald's and Taco Bell and just watch television and coast for the next 4 years. Of course not. Pete Hegseth, on his way to the Pentagon this morning, was interviewed by reporters, and he stood out front of the Pentagon and promised that he knows that even more executive orders are on the way, and that he now, as the director, the leader of the military, is ready and willing to salute to whatever the president tells him to do, wherever he tells him to send the army. So if the president tells him to send the army to a big protest in Washington, D.C. or some major city and shoot people, yes, sir. Or anything, right? Go, send a bunch of soldiers down to the border. Yes, sir. Send a bunch of soldiers to build concentration camps. Yes, sir. So he's got his yes man in the military, overseeing our military. And the only thing that's going to stop it is the opposition. And the opposition is not a political party. The opposition is not the Democrats. Please give up on the Democrats. They are not going to save you. As much as I love Barry Sanders, he's not going to save you. As much as I like AOC, she's not going to save us. Government, politics is not going to save us. We have to shine our light. We have to raise our voices. We have to come together and come up with ideas and plans of what we're going to do. And whatever that is, right? Maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a group, maybe it's an organization. You're going to join an organization, or maybe you're going to start something. And you're going to find ways to push back, to help people that are threatened by this administration, that are threatened by these executive orders, that are threatened by the rise of fascism, and or speak out against it, resist it, say no, say this is wrong, this is evil, this is fascist, this is un-American, this is anti-constitutional. But you need to find something. And you know what? It could also be something really positive. Like I was just talking to a friend the other day, yesterday actually, and she was talking about how she had gotten the address for the cathedral where Bishop Buddy, is the bishop and presides and ministers, and she and her daughter and her little kids all designed cards and to say thank you, and we love you and bless you. That's wonderful. That's part of the resistance, right? That's beautiful. Encourage those people who are standing on the front line. Encourage those people who have the courage to stand up. Go that extra mile and let them know you see them and you appreciate them, and you don't want them to back down. You don't want them to sit down. You don't want them to shut up. So if you can't be the one doing it, please support those who are doing it. That would be wonderful. All right, I got a whole bunch of comments I have not even looked at yet. And I'm going to take a peek. Kathleen Douglas says, it's a wake-up call. It's going to take all of us on both sides to revolt. Yes. Yes, Kathleen, thank you. And again, that's something else to keep in mind. And I want to say something about that. When she said, it's going to take all of us on both sides. Yes, because I do believe there are people who are Republicans. There are people who voted for Donald Trump who are seeing what's happened this first week, who are about to see what's going to happen this week and next month. And if they haven't already, they are moving towards saying, I made a mistake. This is not good. I want this to stop. And that means we might have to work with these people. We're going to have to forgive these people. We're going to have grace for these people and not do this little, I told you so, if they're willing to say, yeah, I made a mistake, this is wrong, this is evil, and they're willing to work with us, we need to work with them because it will take all of us. All right. The whole thing I talk about spiral dynamics and raising human consciousness, right, is that when people move from a lower level of consciousness to a higher level of consciousness and they recognize their shared divinity, their shared humanity, when they recognize that, oh my gosh, when I thought this other way, I behaved a way that was destructive and painful to other people and hurtful to them, and they experience a true repentance, right, for that, our response is grace. Our response is mercy. In the same way Bishop Buddy called for Donald Trump to show mercy to these people that are suffering, I encourage you to show mercy to the MAGA Christians who realize at whatever point it happens, today, next week, next month, however long it takes, show mercy to them, welcome them in, hold their hand, and work side by side with them, because it's only if we work together that we're going to be able to resist what they want to do. And again, by shining our light, I do believe that. I do believe it's true. If we shine our light, it makes the darkness go away. It doesn't eliminate it, because when the light goes out, the darkness is right there again, right? So we have to keep shining, and we have to keep moving that light in other places of darkness to keep shining that light. It's not going away. So Kathleen also says, I think she's talking about the God Squad. She said, you guys kept me sane during that time, believe me. Yep. And hey, they're still going. I'm not with them anymore, but the God Squad is still alive and kicking. Every Wednesday night, what John Fu was saying, and every Thursday live on Facebook and Instagram and on the God Squad. What's it? GodSquadPod.com. So yeah, support those guys. John says, I understand that, but the light only eliminates the bubble, and then the darkness covers the community. Yeah, that is part of the problem. If we're only talking about social media, yes. Yeah, there is that. Paolo Reyes says, I feel the same way. John Suarez says, I think since it's the quote unquote Christian voice influencing government, and these are turning out votes, and if the light people just run to the mountains, then that's not helping the body of Christ. Yeah, exactly. Putting our head in the sand or running away, which again, I was very tempted to leave the country. But again, even that is a little bit of white privilege, right? Because I could leave the country, I guess, much easier than someone else could, but then it doesn't help them. That just leaves them alone. And then again, my light is shining somewhere else. John says, thank you for your willingness to share our stripes. It might not change them, but voices such as ours offer hope to people who are being crushed, that there are people that are for us. Yeah. Kathleen again says, love that. Check out the Working Families Party. Okay, I don't know what that is, but I'll check that out. And John Suarez again says, they are not our enemies. No one we see across from us is. It's only when we look up that we see our oppressors. And by that, I think he means the rich, the oligarchy. Yeah, I mean, again, that is part of it too. Yes, is recognizing like part of the strategy, and it's always been the strategy, is for the ultra rich to divide the poor against the poor. And the ways to divide the poor against the poor is religion, skin color, politics, right? Like even just creating these two different political parties, Democrat and Republican, and then getting them to argue and fight each other is great for them because it keeps you from noticing that who's really in charge and who's really the ones exploiting us are the mega rich. And now the mega rich, the billionaires, which by the way have always been controlling our government, are now just flat out holding office, right? We have a billionaire president who has just appointed a bunch of billionaires to office. They were sitting in the front row of his inauguration, ahead of the cabinet. Yeah, he's got the billionaires financing him, and everything he's doing is to benefit the billionaires, and he's put billionaires in places of authority. Yeah, gee, I wonder what might happen, right? Like, do you really think that electing billionaires to appoint billionaires they're now going to turn and tear down systems that that benefit billionaires for your sake because they care so much about you and they want to protect you? Is that what you think? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just going to say right now that will never happen. Billionaires are not going to, tear down things that benefit billionaires. They're going to do what we would all do. What would you do if you would do things that benefited you if you could get away with it? And I'm telling you, they're going to get away with it. So sorry to say. Yeah. So I guess, again, we're going to kick the can down the road on the Gospel of Mary. Again, I apologize. Hopefully next week I can focus on that and we can talk about the quantum Gospel of Mary. Because yeah, I do care about that because it is genuinely, I will say this about the Gospel of Mary. It very, very similar to the Gospel of Thomas as far as the content of the messaging. In some ways, it's even more explicit. The things that Jesus says in the Gospel of Mary are much more explicit when it comes to this quantum idea of how we are all interconnected. It's actually the very first thing Jesus says, pretty much. Jesus also, well, I don't want to start it now because then I don't have time to finish it. But again, we'll talk about this next week, hopefully. Fingers crossed. If nothing else, if I have to, I'll record a special edition where I just talk about the Gospel of Mary. And so we might get 2 episodes next week or something, if I have to do it that way. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, I apologize to preempt once again my regularly scheduled podcast topic. But again, I just felt like I need to explain what I'm doing and why, that it's not a knee-jerk thing. There are reasons why I feel like I need it right now. And again, if I'm wrong about this, please tell me. I'm sure again, people have already told me, right? I just can't imagine being quiet. Yeah. So I don't know how far away we are. Maybe this week, maybe next week. There's a whole lot of things still left in Project 2025 that haven't been done yet. What is being done is the loyalty test, right? Saying now government employees, if they want to keep their job, have to either say they voted for Trump or explain if they voted against him, why now they have come to see the light and why now they know he is the greatest president ever and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's, God, if I still believed in that left behind, end times, nonsense, man, it would be hard to convince me that Donald Trump was not the Antichrist. Because, dude, Here we go. The only thing he's not doing, right, is putting Christians in, specifically Christians, right? Like, hey, because you love Jesus, I'm putting you in a camp. I'm arresting you. Okay. But I will just say, just food for thought. The majority of the refugees and immigrants that are being rounded up and deported right now, they are Catholics. They're Christians. They're not Hindus and Buddhists. They're not Jews. They're Christians. So in a way, yes, he is arresting and rounding up Christians, not specifically because they're Christian, but because they're the wrong kind of Christian. They're not the kind of Christian that supports him. So again, in that sort of left behind end times dispensational framework, right? Is there room for like Christian pastors who support the Antichrist, who are, wearing the Antichrist, banner and hats, and speaking up and giving legitimacy to the Antichrist and saying, God bless this man? I mean, we see that all through history, right? We see in the Old Testament prophets that were paid money to be, in favor of, to speak lies in favor of, horrible people, horrible kings. Why wouldn't we expect to see that now? If an Antichrist showed up and had power, that and he was favoring those, like, hey, basically, if you're a Christian that supports me, I'm going to give you power. That's exactly what Trump has said, right? You vote for me, Christians, I will give you power. I will, you'll have so much power again. He's flat out promised that. So yeah, I don't know. And again, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't. I know it's hard to believe because the past week that's pretty much all I've done, and that's all I posted. And that, the Friday bonus show, the Sunday Heretic Happy Hour live show, and this show now, Second Cup. I've done a lot of talking about politics again, but I'm not doing it because I love doing it. I'm not talking about it because it's what I want to do. What I want to do is talk about our shared divinity, our shared humanity, about spreading our light and all that. I still believe that is right now our only hope is to keep shining our light and speaking the truth and resisting the darkness. But yeah, man, these feel like unprecedented times. And if things were to go back to some kind of normal, if I felt like somebody was going to stand up and push back the crazy, that would be different. But you know what I mean? Like, none of our institutions are helping us, and they haven't helped us for a long time, right? Like, even just on the side of like consumer protection agencies, right? Which we put these together in the 60s and 70s, right? None of them protect us. The FDA, they don't exist to protect us and our health and our safety. They are silenced by the sugar lobby, the meat lobby, all the food production companies. The FDA is not really allowed to warn us about GMOs or processed sugars, or cancer-causing agents in our food or milk or things like that. Now they're there, but they're not allowed to tell you about it, and they're not allowed to restrict those things because all of those consumer protection agencies they were put together to protect us. But now it's to the point where they get paid a bunch of money by the corporations who really control things, the billionaires, corporations that control things, to ignore things that would help consumers, that would protect consumers. That's you and me. And to continue to promote and allow things that do not benefit us, but absolutely benefit the corporations and the billionaires who control those industries, the drug administration, the food administration, all of those things. So, yeah, so we don't have consumer protection agencies. We don't have a Supreme Court willing to stand up. We don't have an attorney general who, again, Bill Barr was not a great attorney general. He still did a lot of things that looked like he was sort of Donald Trump's personal lawyer. But you know what we have now? You know who's the attorney general going to be the attorney general now? Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Whereas the attorney general's job was supposed to defend us. And even, again, as bad as he was, there were at least moments where Bill Barr had a line that he was not willing to cross, where he would say, well, no, I can't do that. But now we don't have that. There's no one. I can't think of anyone who's willing to say there's a line I won't cross. I hope as things get worse, we'll see more people grow a spine and stand up. Right. But again, I wouldn't put my hope in Democrats. I would put my hope in Democratic officials, elected officials, because even Republican elected officials, right? Like, Wendy and I were talking, like, well, won't any Republicans stand up? It's like, yeah, well, look at what happens to the ones who do, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, not Marjorie Taylor Greene. What am I saying? Forgive me. She has not stood up. Mitt Romney, he stood up. What happened to him? He's out, right? Liz Cheney, she stood up. What happened to her? She kicked out of the party. So, yeah, there have been some people who are brave and who courageous who stood up against, unconstitutional, fascist, abusive, illegal things, who are willing to stand up. But the minute they do, they're out. So there's not enough of them, and there's not enough of them all at once. One here, and then one there, and then another one over here, another one over there. That's not going to do it. They would all have to get together at one time in one place, get 50 of them, and all of them say, okay, all together, we're going to go out there in front of the cameras. We're all going to put our foot down. We're all going to say, no, we're against this. I mean, if we go down, we're all going down together, right? Rather than one guy, yeah, we're right behind you, buddy. We're like 10 feet behind you. So, yeah, I wouldn't put my hope in that. I hope, if we see it, great. It'd be great to see. Yes, it would be wonderful. But I'm not going to hope for that. I'm not going to put my, I'm not going to wait for that, put it that way. I'm not going to wait for that to happen because I doubt it's going to happen. More than one or two people standing up. So what does that leave us? Well, again, it's your opportunity to shine your light. And what does shining your light mean? It means, yeah, I guess it does mean posting some things or speaking out against some things on social media. But you know what it really means, I think, even beyond that, is like real life, the real world. Conversations over dinner with friends or family members. Correcting lovingly, kindly, patiently, correcting misinformation. Gosh, that's hard to do, isn't it? We're so passionate about these things. We're so upset about these things. We have such a small fuse when it comes to people's ignorance about these things because they're not paying attention. They're only watching, news media that reinforces the bullshit. But as much as possible, speaking out and showing people the truth. Jordan Klepper had a really great clip last week of going to the inauguration and showing photographs of the violence of January 6th to Trump supporters. And most of them, cognitive dissonance couldn't, even though they were initially shocked by the pictures, were like, well, no, I still support the pardons. But there was one guy who said, I've never seen these images. This is the first time I've ever seen these pictures. He didn't know. And he admitted, maybe the conservative media that I'm consuming isn't giving me the whole picture. And Jordan thanked him for that. He goes, wow, that's refreshing. Thank you for admitting that, right? And like I said, yeah, maybe that's on me for not really, doing the research and really looking outside of my bubble. And so that's great, right? That gives you some hope, at least, that some people, when you show them the truth, they might actually say, oh, wow. But I hope they would also take the next step of saying, okay, if the media I'm consuming isn't showing me these pictures, it's not showing me this violence, it's not showing me the truth, then that means they're lying to you. And why are they lying to you? And if they're lying to you about these things, what else are they lying to you about? Helping people to wake up to that. I think that's really important. And I think it has to be done with grace. I will say, as much as I love, you know, Jesse Dalmar and Pac-Man and all those guys, I think sometimes when they interacting with callers or with people, MAGA Christians and stuff, I just feel like a little more compassion and understanding in that reaction, in that conversation. I think it would be way more powerful than the belittling and the insulting and the yelling and the argumentation. Like, you know what I mean? Again, it's about the spiral dynamics. It's about shifting your consciousness, and people don't shift their consciousness when they're in sort of like a fight, right? When they're in a fight, when they're in a conflict, you have to bring that down, bring the temperature down, and have it be a kind, respectful, loving, listening, understanding conversation. Give them time to connect the dots. Don't force it on them. Don't connect the dots for them. Yeah, it's very difficult. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting me, I hope. And yeah, if you would listen this Thursday night, Coast to Coast Radio. If there is a replay, I don't know if they do a replay online or anything like that, but if there is one, of course, I'll try to share it. But if you can listen live, that would be great. I think they're going to take calls. I don't listen to the show that, I think I've only heard it once. So I don't know if they take calls anymore. I hope so, though. I'd love to take some calls. And if some of you would call and, ask some questions about the Gospel of Thomas or something like that, or quantum spirituality, that'd be really fun. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Second Cup with Keith. Until then, keep shining your light, keep building the new, and keep pushing back the darkness. All right. Love you guys. God bless. Take care.